All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. We have a new month ahead of us. We are in quarter two. We're about to close out quarter two this month and the first half of 2025. This is a period where some people are anticipating an end to the Bitcoin cycle. So here or within quarter three. So getting very close to that cycle peak. But more importantly, if you are following altcoins, this is a video you do not want to miss, because we are seeing new cycle lows for the altcoin charts. Now, there are going to be some that have closed out relatively okay. You could potentially put it into strong for this month, and I'll cover those towards the end of the video. But first, we got to start with Bitcoin, and of course, giving a like to the channel. Subscribe if you're new here. It's your home of macro cycle analysis. I'm going to cover Bitcoin. We're going to look at the stock markets. Also, from a macro point of view, we're going to look at the US dollar. We're going to look at commodities and Microstrategy, as well as the slide continues for Microstrategy and Michael Saylor. But first, let's kick it off with a broad look at Bitcoin, what we've been tracking now for the entire cycle. So looking at our monthly reviews of the market. Now, the main thing to note here, at least for myself, we've got the May closing month, and this is the closing price right here, just above the 50% extension. So that's some good news for Bitcoin holders. As I said, not necessarily altcoins, but Bitcoin holders here. The 50% level comes in at $104,500, and the May close was $104,650. So it is slightly above. I would have liked to have seen a slightly higher close, because it doesn't really fill me with a lot of confidence, but at least it's just slightly above the 50%. Also, it is the highest monthly close in history. So that's another solid thing. Again, I've got to layer it with a bit of bearishness just to balance out the view here. That's how the markets work. It was a lower close than the previous old all-time highs. And on this particular bar, or if you are used to looking at candles, you can see that the close was starting to fall below the top. Ideally, you want to see closes as close to the top as possible, which shows signs of strength for the upcoming month. So you can see, as an example, we saw the November close was relatively strong, and the next month did go higher. Of course, we had the reversal and it tested it again. So it did hold out here for a bit of time, but then you got to the month of January and that close was lower. And then of course we had the sell-off from there. You can see from April, there's a nice strong close out of a low. So that's another strong sign there. And then May followed through. You can see a strong close here. The next month followed through. You can see strong close here, next month followed through. Strong close, followed through. Weaker close, month paused. Okay, so it's not a 100% guarantee that just because you see a strong close that the month has to follow through, but more often than not, if you get a strong close, you're generally going to see the month follow through and at least test some higher prices. So ideally, we've done enough, but just be on alert in case that hasn't happened. Now, the other thing that we're following is the weekly swings here, which have, in terms of a timing perspective, that's this chart right here. We're at 6 weeks to the upside. This week that just closed was an inside week. Some of you might be looking at this like a red week. It's a down week. It has a lower high, but a higher low. So in terms of buyers and sellers, the traders in the market, they are undecided. Yes, they did close the market lower, but they did not break the previous swing low, or the previous week's low, sorry, and they did not break the week's high. Now, this could follow on for another week or two. We just got to keep waiting to see whether we do get this pullback and where does that pullback come in. So I'll get to that in just a moment. The main thing we were watching was the probabilities of more than 6 or 7 weeks in the same swing to the upside, because the market has not done that very often in this bull market or in any of the previous 2 bull markets. So you rarely see more than 8 weeks in one swing to the upside without a pullback or a pause. And like last time we saw the 8-week move to the upside, this paused here for about 9 weeks before breaking out. We saw 7 weeks to the upside, and then this paused for about 8 months. We saw 6 weeks to the upside, then this paused, it digested the move, it did distribute, corrected, consolidated, and then pushed higher again, but this all just takes time. So the main thing here is when you see these extensions of weeks in the same direction, generally you'll see at least a pause, maybe a significant pullback here, pause, or even just a bit more of a shallow pullback. These ones here were about 20 odd percent. So there's 19.5 from the 6 week, or from the peak, you got 22%. So the probabilities now are that we'll probably see some sort of market consolidation here for June, which also lines up with some of the cycle analysis that we are watching. So that's the weekly. We looked at the monthly there. I just wanted to look at this monthly quickly as well. Again, we've pulled up short at the all-time highs resistance line here, 2017, 2021, couple of hits, 2021 again, and then also 24 and 25. Yes, I know there's quite a lot of people that are now watching this chart. Yeah, we've been posting it for a little while. Nonetheless, there are a lot of people that are watching this. We haven't got a direct hit on it yet, but it's still just something I keep in the back of my mind because it also lines up pretty well with the USDT charts here. So basically the stablecoin charts that I'll get to in just a moment. Now, Bitcoin's monthly returns. How do we look for June? We've had the closeout of May at 11%, which was quite nice. And the percentages here for June, using all of the data, is 57% chance of a green month, which means you have a 43% chance of a red month. But if we take out the bearish years, so 2014, 2018, 2022, basically the big ones there that had a lot of red, that now flips the percentages a little higher here, 63.64. So to me, that's still just as good as a coin flip. I'd rather see something that's a little bit more on the side of probabilities, but anything between 40 to 60 or even just up to 70%, I don't really consider anything of significance, or if it's going to help my trading or investing. Either way, this thing could flip down and still remain within the month of May, right? So even if this pulled back, we could go anywhere as low as $94,000 and you would still have an inside month, but it could be a red month. So an inside meaning, like we saw on the weekly charts, lower highs, higher lows, a market that is still undecided or still needs time to wind up and then release its power, hopefully to the upside, maybe to the downside, but obviously the bulls are hoping to the up. And that leads us to the daily chart now. And this is the pullback that, you know, we've been discussing here on the channel, history repeating, coming to an end, stop wasting your time with altcoins. I'll get to that in a moment. That was a good news one there. But essentially with the daily chart here, we've had an extension on the move to the downside. So the first swing out of the all-time high, and we've got a breakdown of the 50. You can see here there's the 100% extension. So this is for the trades, and we got very close to 150%. So we now have an extension move to the downside. So next up, we're going to move the extensions to have a look at any sort of targets we have to the downside again. If this day starts to head up, then you just have to keep adjusting this. But we've got a bit of a resistance here at about 106.5. That was a previous daily swing low before the market broke down. Nice move underneath that low. So that seems to be a pretty important price point, 106.5. 106.5 was also the daily lower swing high out of the all-time high. So you can see here just how important those lower swing highs out of an all-time high are. That was 106.5, and from that point, market failed, and then we ran into that April low. So I'm keeping my eye on this 106.5 level. If Bitcoin's price can get above that, then I would say that we're probably going to see some sort of strength, or at least a consolidation in strength here. If we reject off this level, 106.5, then probably going to see at least the test here of about 100, these previous lows, maybe even get as far as these other highs at around $97,000, $98,000, which would be that roughly 100% move of this range. You can see this range here, probably somewhere around here, sort of 98, 99. So 106.5. If you take nothing else from this, just watch that level over the next day or two for a close above that level. That could mean consolidation up here, but I think if we get the rejection, that could mean consolidation in a much bigger range and probably more likely somewhere in this zone right here. Nonetheless, you still got the 50% level, which is the entire range. coming in at $93,000. So that's still in a relatively strong position if the price remains within this zone overall. Underneath that zone, we can discuss that at the time, but I think that's a little way off. So overall, things are still leaning to the bullish side longer term. Shorter term, as we've just covered, there is still more room to the downside, but it could still remain in a long-term strong position. So Bitcoin for the month of June, if you're just looking purely at the data here, you'd have to say, oh, it's got to be green. I'm not leaning on the side that it has to be green because these figures are just too uncertain. There's too much of a coin flip being at 63%. But if I take a look at just the charts themselves, even if we get a pullback within this zone here and above sort of the mid 90,000s, I'm still leaning quite bullish for the rest of this cycle. And I think that's mostly going to be the case. It's just the daily chart here, short-term downtrend. Now, if you want to get access to these indicators and of course the predictive cycles, which I'm about to look at, the link is in the video description right here, TIA Indicator Suite, and of course TIA Premium is also there as well. So let's take a look at the stock markets for the month of June. Now, this is leading up to the point that I've been very interested in around the second half of June. However, the cycle might just come out probably around mid-June. That's sort of where this little peak starts and then the pullback, right? So if that happens, then I think that would be more consolidation for Bitcoin. And that's probably, within about 2 weeks' time, we'll be able to know whether that's getting closer to that point. As you can see with the monthly here for the S&P 500, it's had some relatively good strength. We got back above the swing lows. There was a swing low here in January. Nice close above that level. We also got the extension of the move and also a close above the 2-month extension 50% level. It's a mouthful, but it's basically that number there, 5,854, which is really close to these lows as well for the month of December, January, and February. And May closed above those points, 1, 2, 3, and this line here, and this 50%. So overall, it's a relatively good sign for the market moving forward. How does June play out? That's the difficult one here, but we have seen some pretty good strength to the upside. So even if it consolidates for June or even has a slight pullback and remains above 55 to 5,600 points, you're still in a pretty good position overall to see further strength later in the year. It's always looked like, and that's what we've been pointing out with the cycle forecast, a bit of a tough time closing out Q2 and then into Q3. July, August, September, there's a pullback in August through many of the cycles. We're looking back at 20 years and 10 years as well. August is not an easy time for the S&P 500. Here's 10 years ago, and this big red bar, you can see there when you compare it to the previous market movements, doesn't look like much now, but at the time, that's one of the most significant moves the market had seen in about 6 years coming out of the GFC. So you can imagine the headlines that were around through 2015. It was this month here, August, really big correction, couple of months up, and then back down into January, February, and then it was off to the races again for 2016 and the election year into another peak in 2018. So basically, all I'm pointing out here is that August hasn't been an easy time from the last 10 and I believe somewhere around that 20-year mark as well. So you've got an August move, but also a couple of corrections there into August and October before the market started to get going a little clearer and cleaner in the second half of the year. So that's the S&P 500 leading into the end of Q2 and the first half before we get to open up for Q3. How does the US dollar look? Well, it's also having a bit of a tough time. Did close okay compared to the previous month, which was basically straight down. Higher low at the moment. It looks like it wants to attempt around the 100, 101 again. But I think longer term, it's still in this, well, obviously you can see it's a big downtrend here. And even if it takes some time, I think we've got further downside to go for the US dollar. You can see the 3-year new low closing price has led to consolidations, and it seems like, well, that's what we're in again, as I've been pointing out now for a few weeks. So good news for Bitcoin longer term, I'd say, if we start to see this continue to break down. I think that's going to be good news for BTC and for the S&P, even if it takes a bit more time here, as we've been following now with the cycle analysis. I suspect we'll see the breakout through to the end of the year for the S&P 500, if not sooner. As for the commodities index, it is still grinding sideways. Basically, I mean, you could almost get away with it saying it's a 4-year grind with just the war spike. It's happened in 22. That's, of course, the war between Russia and Ukraine spiked it out. You had oil spike, you had wheat spike, you had all sorts of foods and stuff, which is what is made up of this index. But I'll cover this more in future videos. Essentially, it's still in a grinding range with many commodities also breaking out to new fresh highs. Things like coffee as well is at new fresh highs. Gold, of course, has hit new fresh highs. But yeah, more on that in future videos. It's still grinding sideways there. Now, MicroStrategy has been a big one that I'm tracking as it has essentially played out so far. Can always change, but so far, this has been going on for months. I've been watching this since November, most closely here on the channel. So 6 months now, very similar to the last cycle. Now, just because Bitcoin goes to a new all-time high, and I've pointed them all out here on the chart, and you'll see it a little clearer on the weekly, Bitcoin's gone to new all-time highs on each of these bars. Meanwhile, MicroStrategy has not, and has put in some cases, lower highs, and in these cases, just broke the previous high, but still lower highs overall. Just like last cycle, lower highs. There was February and April all-time highs for BTC. Meanwhile, MicroStrategy's put in lower highs. Now, I'm just using this as a bit of a countdown tool to the end of the cycle. Doesn't mean it has to be a guarantee. But if we're just using it similar to last cycle, that's estimated to be Q3 of 2025, which is pretty insane if we think there's a lot further to go in BTC. Now, there could be. Bitcoin can always hit new all-time highs. Meanwhile, MicroStrategy put in lower highs, as we've seen. But anyway, just looking at this in terms of a time frame, keeping it up to date, this move out of the low has looked relatively healthy for MicroStrategy. So it could be putting in a nice consolidation here before, if Bitcoin gets going again, we might see this start to head higher. Be on the lookout and warning if MicroStrategy fails again at these highs. Roughly around 430 to 440. Failure there would probably mean further downside for MicroStrategy. Even if Bitcoin's looking okay, Bitcoin's putting in some fresh highs. It's done it before. I dare say it'll do it again. And it's a very common pattern if it continues to fail at a particular level. And then you start to see lower lows get put in. Okay, let's keep up to date with that as a nice timing mechanism for the end of the cycle. Now, just like how does that work? Just a quick one on MicroStrategy. You got insider activity, number of insider trades. Essentially, you got MicroStrategy selling off their token here, or their stock, I should say, not a token, but selling off the stock to go and buy BTC. So if you think you're going to get into MicroStrategy to make a ton of money, it hasn't really done anything over this entire period because they keep selling it to then go and leverage the shit out of themselves into BTC, which potentially pushes the price of Bitcoin up, along with many other fundamental reasons. Now, if Bitcoin starts to head down even a little bit, I think the average price now for the holdings for MicroStrategy is around 69,000 thereabouts. That could mean they'll have to sell off even more to try and pump the price of BTC, which doesn't sound very good. But if you ask Michael Saylor, he thinks it's the answer to markets going up. It sounds a little like a Ponzi scheme, but I'll leave that up to you, even though I may have influenced your thoughts there. Just keep following the chart. I can always be completely wrong, but for now, the chart has essentially told us that, and that's how I'm reading it. You might read it a little different to me. Okay. That leads us to altcoins now. We're looking at USDT dominance. So the closing price of the month for USDT dominance wasn't so bad. We got to close at 4.74 and the 50% level is at 4.75. So basically a fraction, 0.01 underneath that level. So it's still way too early to call whether this is going to be a strong sign for USDT. We want to see this go down, or at least the bulls want to see this go down, but it gave us basically nothing on the monthly close because it was dead on the flipping 50% level. Now, the only other short-term benefit to the close for the bulls is that it closed underneath 5% and you're 4.97, which is the 50% level. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers out here, but all you have to do is look at the low to the high on this macro move. This is a monthly chart. slice it in the middle, basically divide it by 2 in that move, and you have this number here on the side. Okay, so it closed under that, which is a good sign for the bulls, meaning there's a little bit more weakness here. I don't think it's enough yet because it's still closed above the all-time support line, which is basically called all of the previous all-time highs for BTC. I don't think it's done enough, which means we're still stuck in a rock and a hard place for USDT dominance, and there's still no signs here whether the market's going to give us more stable coins to go and pump the market with, Bitcoin and alts, or if it's going to take it from us and people sell off all of their shit coins and go back into stables. That's the difficulty here. Now, the other thing which was a little bit worrying for altcoin holders, traders, if you know what you're doing, you're probably going to be okay. But yeah, for holders, we had another close underneath the 50% level here at 900 billion. That was a pretty rough week last week, a sell-off, a few attempts, weekly close here, here, and then a sell-off. And you're just holding in there with a closing price above the weekly swing top in April of 843 billion. So there's a closing price last week of 850. And in terms of the month, you're still just above these levels here. So it's very weak at this point in time. The volume has increased on that sell-off month as well. What we need next for alts is for it to happen this month. If Bitcoin is chilling out here, putting in that reversal and just holding its ground, this is the biggest bullish hopium case I can deliver. If Bitcoin just holds out here for June, then that might give the altcoins enough to load its altcoin season and break past 910 billion, hopefully the top here at 960 billion. And ideally for anything massive, you're going to get a break above 1.16 trillion. So that's the bullish hopium case I can give for the current very weak close on total 3. Damn it. Well, we got the others dominance here. I was hoping to finish on that hopium, but anyway, others dominance hit a new fresh 4-year low, 4.3-year low here at 52 months. So this is all of your altcoins excluding the top 10, and the top 10 has Bitcoin, ETH, stable coins, XRP, Solana, you name it, okay? So not including those, but everything else, all the other shit coins, the 2 million that sit out there. And it hit a new fresh low and a new fresh low closing price. And it's 52 months all the way down. Now, the last time, if I can throw a bit of hopium on it here, when we got to this level, that was in January 2021 and December 2020, that was basically the bottom of that altcoin move before it pumped really, really hard. So if you want any sort of hopium, which maybe the altcoin lovers and bulltards will give you, is that we're coming back into this zone. Now, in terms of a percentage move from the current closing price to the low, which is the support line here at 5.6%, that's about a 25% drop for the others chart. Doesn't mean your altcoin's going to drop 25%. Who knows? It depends which one you have. Some are going to be okay. Others are all going to get absolutely obliterated and break those lows. But they're the levels I'm watching out for here to see if there's going to be any sort of turnaround like what happened in 2021. You know, support back here in 2017, even after the bull market, it still started to rise. That was the others there. And really not much else to be looking quite happy about, or at least the bulls to be happy about here. So that's others. Now, there's a few alts to have a look at. So like and subscribe, and links in the video description for TI Premium Indicator Suite. And if you guys are in Australia, SwiftX, go and check out that exchange, $20 a free BTC. Okay, so the shout out's done. Let's have a look at ETH. It did close okay here above the support line, which had broken down for a couple of months and then just shot back above last month in May, but still got rejected at the 50% level, 2,700, 2,800. So with everything that we know about the others chart, the total 3, which is the altcoin market chart, the stable coin charts, and now we see it on the altcoins, just keep in mind there is still the possibility, yes, it could be an alt season, but still the possibility that this is a bit of a failed rally for now until you see a breakout of these key levels. And you can see how the market has basically run up to the key levels and tested them multiple times and then closed underneath it. So although I don't want to shit on your parade of an altcoin season, the market, the charts are just saying we're testing the important resistance levels that could flip from a bear market rally to a bull market rally. Now, I know they're both Bs, but you're going to have to just deal with it. So I think it needs to get through this level here, $2,700 to $2,900. That is going to be a key move there for ETH to then go and tackle the 3,000, the 3,500, the 4,000, and maybe even break through and go a little more crazy than that. So that's a big level to watch this week. Other levels we're looking at for Solana also had a pullback, but closed above 150, so that's okay. Just a bit of a short-term weakening here with the move not extending the first leg. So this move here was shorter. This one here is the longest move. This one here was shorter. So the sellers came back into control for the last few weeks. Probably going to need a little bit of time. Same thing for XRPs, been sold off again, close to this $2.10 low, and then you got your 50%. So again, just looks like it wants more time again. And then SUI back at 330 did test the low and broke it, close, high, slightly above, but above the 50% here at $2.90 and $3. So for these majors, Sol, SUI, XRP, they look like they need a little more time to consolidate this move. And just as we looked at with the others charts, totals charts, stablecoins charts, and then BTC, if this is able to consolidate here, that could be some good things for the end of the cycle. Remember, the bull market has been going now for over 2.5 years. Over 2.5 years. If we get a bit of consolidation, we might see a bit of a blow-off move here for this last stage. Like, subscribe. I'll see you guys back here with the next video. Thanks again, and take care.